Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast, where we discuss customer experience, employee experience, and transformation in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, a blueprint for creating an experience-led organization, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of CareerGig and the host of the Agile World podcast. Today we're going to talk about how to adapt your events to be more virtual in a marketing environment that is in continual fluctuation. With the massive changes that COVID-19 has brought to the world of corporate and association events, many companies have scrambled to adapt to make them virtual with mixed results. Some organizations, however, have found a way to innovate and create great experiences despite the limitations. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Mark Michelson, CEO of CX Talks. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about CX Talks and what you do there?
Sure. CX Talks was started as a local event in Atlanta, Georgia, around 6 years ago. And we intended it, the first day we did it, it was just for an association called the CXPA. And so it's about customer experience. And the idea that we came up with at the first meeting was to have 10 different speakers give 10-minute talks each. So we didn't really call it CX Talks at the time. It was just an event idea. But there was such good enthusiasm from that event that we decided to invite other associations to participate in the idea of creating a full day event. We got 18 different associations together, all of them very engaged in customer experience, but from different angles. As you know, customer experience has a pretty diverse discipline set, if you will, anything from store design to product design to CRM. You can go into voice of customer, etc. So from that first meeting, where we had 18 associations, we just did a head count around the room, and it was like, gosh, if we just got their average number of people that could come from each of the associations, we would have like 500 something people. And it was kind of funny because it was laughable, but it was also scary because we still wanted to do it. But at some point, we couldn't do it on a volunteer basis anymore. There had to be, when we plotted it out, we had meals involved, we had space involved, AV systems, a whole process of things. So I said, I'll take that on within my association management company, because I've started a few associations. I took it on under that banner and under that company. So someone had to sign the bills, someone had to pay the bills and sign the contracts. And so I ended up doing that. As time went on, we grew the event into other markets, and we always intended it to be the local market bridge, a time for people to come together in a local market like Chicago or Dallas or Atlanta and get to know each other, because there's so many people that do customer experience now, but they may not know others from other industries or other disciplines within their own city. So that was our goal. And
Great.
Yeah, so that was the background, and we were really doing quite well with it. The past 4 years or so, every year we would add a new market. This year we were going to be in Seattle on June 12th at Microsoft's headquarters. They were going to actually have it on their property, and of course the world changed back in March. We knew it was, winds about it was coming down in February, but March closed everything. So that's where the pivoting and agility came into play.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that and how you've adapted CX Talks to the current landscape. So, unlike some organizations that jumped in right away and tried virtual events as soon as they could plan them, you took a little bit of time to assess the best way to approach things. How did taking a step back help you?
Well, I think it helped because I'm able to learn more about the different technology stacks that go into it. Number one. And the second thing is everyone sort of rushed to do what they were already doing in the real world and just trying to put that same event on in a virtual realm. And I just felt that it was getting to be just all vanilla and very kind of boring in the same, format all the time. And I signed up for a ton of these webinars and online events, and just even learning how the landscape forms. Anytime you have a new thing, like everyone's moving to virtual, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? A virtual summit or conference is usually over several days and maybe has, you know, anywhere from 10 to, 400 speakers. But it's all, it's how it's managed. The larger conferences, they really, really needed to sort of reproduce what they do on a virtual set. And I've actually participated in a few of those events as speakers as well. Um, the other types of events that are happening out there are quite different, though. There's just the coffee chat in the morning, or if you want the, happy hour in the afternoon. There are things. What do they call those? AMAs, Ask Me Anythings. There are interviews just like this. There are so many different formats that was, I think, the biggest advantage I had was being able to say, all right, what is it about CX Talks that makes it unique and special? And how do we not necessarily do a full day event on a webinar or a conference, but rather I'm thinking in terms of programming, having a regularly scheduled weekly or even biweekly program, like a channel, like a TV channel or radio program, if you will. But since it's recorded with video, we would have people come to the thing, and it would be a very short presentation. That's where we started, and that's where we're sticking to. So the idea of short attention span theater is the idea of 15 minutes of fame. You got to get it in within, say, 15-minute, 20-minute total presentation, and then we have Q&A. We do some networking around it as well, because that's a huge reason. Why should I go there now versus just watch some recording? So we wanted to have some engagement opportunities for people who attend live. So before we ever give the presentation, there's like 20 minutes of chats, if we will, and then at the end of each session, we have another 30 minutes of guided networking where we can have breakout rooms and smaller video conferences going on right after the main session. So all in all, the value of waiting is you get to position yourself more clearly. You're not just replicating what you did before. You're trying to come up with a voice that people understand and recognize and that they want to tune into each week. And I think the other benefit is we're not moving totally, we just can't meet now, but when we will meet again, I think that we're going to be in a strong position to still have that, the local market on a very small, local, intimate group. So, maybe 100 total people will come, but we're going to do a lot more markets.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I mean, I agree. Like some of the early, I attended a few early virtual conferences, and honestly, didn't see the difference between that and me just either watching TV all day or just watching YouTube or something like that. It was really, obviously, a lot of people were trying to find their way and make some value. But I like what you said about the networking component as well. I just to follow up on that one before we talk a little bit more about the future. Like how have you deemed that? Do you think it was successful? Are there some other things that you might do differently on that part? Because I do think that is why people go to. It's a big reason, at least, why people go to events is that they can go and meet new people and experience something firsthand versus, again, just kind of watching a TED Talk on YouTube or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's totally voluntary. If people want to do it or not. But when you go through something like speed networking, right?
Yeah.
I've attended a few of those types of events, and they've been really interesting because there's a couple of them that are weekly, but they get maybe 400 or 500 people each week. And they do a really good job because they'll break everyone out into small groups. And then you only have like 6 people in your breakout room, and you can talk for like 15 minutes about a specific topic. And then you're put back into the pool.
Yeah.
And then you're mixed up with another 6 people, right? I'm constantly looking at, and I think that the technology is constantly changing as well around the engagement area. On a Zoom call, you can chat. You have the chat function. You can have Q&A. Those are a little bit passive because there's no voices involved, right? There's no personality other than, well, maybe if you can type personality out.
Right.
But there are other tools that are out there that I constantly am looking at that can do things like have engagement with a community or even ongoing engagement. Even if you're watching a recording, if you put in some sort of comments, that can be automatically sent to the speaker or presenters to answer.
Yeah.
So, even if it's a year from now, you can still have
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of
That's a good
comments
point.
going on, right? And being notified of those types of things too. The other thing is people who come, they may or may not be open to meeting other people or just putting their contact info out there. So you have to do it in a way that allows people to say, yes, I'll give my LinkedIn contact info, but I'm not going to give you my email address or phone yet, right?
Yeah.
If,
Yeah.
if if they want to meet, they can meet. There's also software that you can meet one-on-one in the systems. That's like a third-party software kind of thing, versus within the Zoom format. And so I've looked at those types of things, but I don't want to just detract from our program with having people go off and talk with each other while we're doing one of our presentations or talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking at those things still, and again, I have the luxury to sort of play with it, but I don't want to confuse people by saying, "Oh, go to this website while you're in here and watch this."
Right. Right. That's a lot of conflicting instructions or
Yeah,
expectations. Yeah.
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 Use your app on the phone to communicate with us while we're watching.
Right, right. No, that makes sense. Well, yeah. So let's go a little in the future now, and obviously things are going to be the way they are for a bit, and hopefully not any longer than they need to. But we're kind of where we are for a little while at least. But what kind of lessons can we learn from these times? So, I mean, let's say once we're able to do in person events on a regular basis, what can we learn from these times that might make those events better?
um, so in that area, I think that there's going to be a lot of innovation, just because it's forced innovation. Yes. Um,
Yeah,
and some of the cooler things I've seen, they're just out of my budget, but some of the cooler things I've seen almost go back to the old school days of when we had communities that had avatars and you could like move them around and they were 3D in an
yeah,
environment.
yeah,
Right. There was games like this a lot of games. Right. And so now I've seen a few different virtual venues set up, and everything from like a giant festival, for music festival, with 6 stages to go to and vending and all this kind of stuff, right? But you are a virtual little avatar, and you can move it around in the room and have it dance or whatever, right? And that's also being done to sort of replicate the large conference environment. So you go into the main hall and it looks like a hall, there's video at the top. So it's like going into a movie theater, but you can talk to people. You can actually stand next to someone and introduce yourself and so forth. So,
yeah,
so that's pretty fun. I think it's fun engagement and it has its place. Almost more for entertainment though than like serious content. The other things I think that are going to happen, it just has to do with formatting and how we engage, right? So one of the big things in dealing with any kind of big program like that is multicasting. So you got to cast it out on YouTube and your own website and on
yeah,
LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you can get the multi-stream going. So more and more of that's going to happen where people can sort of jump in from any point, but whether they're interacting or not is going to be filtered by that. So in other words, if I'm doing a webinar, there are some tools that can bring comments and things from like YouTube back to you as you're doing it live.
Yeah.
But if you're multicasting out on all these different platforms, it's really hard to keep up with. And I think that's going to be improved over time as well. The other,
So do you? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing I've seen that's kind of fun is there's more and more of the well, bringing in swag and other things to the house in preparation for a online event. To try to get some of that enthusiasm, excitement that we used to have about, getting coffee mugs, tens,
Right. Right.
and sunglasses and such. I did one, and I received this really nice box of stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah. It made me feel like I was a part of the deal.
Right. Right. So do you see some organizations continuing virtual events instead of physical events? Even when it's possible to do as many physical events as you want to. I mean, do you see some of these virtual things becoming, staying around, in other words, and there being kind of like a hybrid between, what the schedule might be a hybrid of virtual and in person?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to completely replace. Hybrid's probably more likely. There are different needs to do different things online, okay? And for instance, if you're doing product demos or you're doing sales calls or, presenting whatever it is, business type things, that's going to happen all the time online, continuously. I mean, you can go just
Yeah.
sign up for training and that kind of stuff. You can do that easier online than you can in person. The things people do crave, they're high touch. They're very, it's, we go to these conferences because it's not necessarily just the content, but who can I meet? And do I have an opportunity to meet someone where I can further my business, whether it's a new vendor or a new client? That's the main reason you go. And frankly, a lot of that activity happens outside of the programming, usually at the bar, or at a restaurant,
Yeah.
or wherever. So you try to build your community and help them get the content they want, but yet provide that sort of, opportunity to meet each other as real world as we can make it. Now, I think personally, when we do get over this COVID situation and we're allowed to meet again, people are going to come back in droves. People really do miss that high touch. As a musician, I've been playing some here in Atlanta in very, safe conditions like outdoors and such. And the people are incredibly appreciative now, more so of music even than they were, before. Although before we'd have big crowds, but now they're coming and paying attention and doing tips and things just because they appreciate being, out again.
Yeah.
Say. And I think that there was an old philosopher guy, media philosopher named Marshall McLuhan. And I think it was back in the 60s, 70s. As we have more high tech come into our lives, we crave more high touch. So that high tech, high touch balance, it's going to be more interplay than we imagine. Could you imagine going through this epidemic or the pandemic without having the web?
Right. No, I cannot. For what it's worth, yeah.
Yeah. So if you turn it on its head, it's like, no, it's not. Always going to have the web now. It's part of our lives. But it's the format and the idea of meeting. From my point of view as a meeting organizer, event organizer, I stay in touch with the news somewhat. The big conferences are going to have a real trouble coming back, just like the big concerts and sporting events. It's going to be the smaller things that are going to happen, and people less willing to travel too. So, if you can bring together people locally, I'll drive to a place, and then I want to make sure there's safety things in place, distancing and all that. But even then, when I did a survey, for instance, I did a survey on what kind of formats you might want to have, and both for in person and online. And it was almost laughable because around 50% of my sample wanted to start meeting soon, like fourth quarter this year, and saw no problem with getting together without wearing masks and or any kind of distancing. The other 50% said, no way, we're not going to go there until there's, some sort of something. The earliest is going to be like, spring of 2021 or whenever we get a vaccine. So, there are lots of different kinds of people out there. There are lots of different formats and ways to meet. Um, and I think that anything we do virtual is going to support that in-person meeting even more.
Yeah. No, agreed. Well, one last question before we wrap up. When we talked earlier, we talked a bit about your background as an entrepreneur and your business background, and you said there really hasn't been a time when you weren't an entrepreneur. So, how do you think that set you up to be agile and adaptive as a business owner?
Yeah, I've been through a few of these tragedies, so to say, national tragedies. I guess the drive for me to be an entrepreneur started when I was a teenager, really. I grew up, my dad had an ad agency, but I just did odd jobs for him, but it kind of helped me understand. He moved from public television to advertising. And I saw, lifestyle changes. I saw things like, he was able to work from home, even back in those days when home wasn't cool to work in.
Right.
Now everyone's in on it.
Right.
And so I started my first company. Actually, when I got to school, I was playing music to get through school. And a friend of mine approached with a magazine. So I started helping him with that. Sold the magazine, and I'd made more in school than I was getting offered when I got out. So that's a good spot to be, I guess. But I was like, okay, I might as well go ahead and start another company.
Right.
So my first one, right when I graduated, was an ad agency. I had a market research division. We did pretty good. We were doing broadcast advertising, things like that. Grew fairly quickly. We did about 2 million the first year, and like 21, 22 years old. So I'm like, yay. So we got some publicity and stuff, and it was a cool brand. I called the Ad Shop. Um, and what happens is as far as agility and stuff, I mean, with an ad agency, you're only as good as your clients. And sometimes those clients are great, and sometimes they're not so great. So we had one client that was really big, and they went bankrupt. They had some kind of fraud happening in the company, and anyhow, had to deal with that at age like 24.
Wow.
Owing like millions of dollars all of a sudden. You're like, oh, like, no, so that helped me understand, what I liked and didn't like about that business. So we ended up being equal with everyone. We negotiated with all the media and got some payments out of the client. And then, you move on. But I decided at that point, I didn't really care for the advertising business because I didn't want to be a bank again. Back in those days, you bought the media and then the client paid you and then you paid the media and you made percentages. I didn't want to do that again. So I said, let's do research. I really enjoy that. Anyhow, it's more like strategy and voice of customer and stuff. And these are all this old school days back in the 80s. We didn't have internet and all that yet. So as I moved into that field, I grew that company pretty solidly for about 20, 25 years, had a bunch of employees, and we were doing work all over the world. And then I'd started another business in the trade show industry back in the 90s, late 90s, and it was taking off nicely. I'd done so much work for my clients at trade shows. They wanted to intercept people and do interviews there or bring them in for focus groups or whatever, because a B2B trade show at the time, particularly in the computer or technology fields, you'd have 30, 40,000 people of your target audience. So they're gathered for like 3 days, Yeah. So it made a lot of sense for us and to my clients to try to talk to those people while they're there, particularly if they're hard to reach people like, ophthalmologists or something, right? So we actually, I reached out and contacted some of the venue management and learned that whole landscape around it, because I had a lot of resistance from the show organizers to do research at their event. They were like, nope, you can do it in the client's booth and that's it, or you can buy a booth and we're sold out. And I was like, well, I can't really do this for my client. My client's IBM. They don't want anyone to know it's IBM doing it. And I'm like, how do I do this? So we ended up renting a restaurant like across the street from the convention center. Rented the whole restaurant out, bought everyone lunches just to interview them, right? You got our job. But the guy who ran that show actually sent me a letter and said we'd arrest anyone on site from my company if we were inside the venue at the conference center. So I waited a little bit and I reached out to him later. I said, hey, I'd like to come meet with you and talk and figure out what's going on. He goes, he's kind of gruff, but I was like, okay, let's do it. So I flew up to Washington and met this guy, and just turned out he just didn't really get it, And I was like, look, there's a real opportunity to just talk to people who come to these events, and there's a lot of money, and your clients want to do this. So after a little bit of convincing and coaching, he agreed, and then after he agreed, I opened up maybe I think it was like 15 major event organizers, trade show organizers. That thing was taking off like a rocket, and everyone's holding on for it, right? And a whole nother staff involved, different buildings involved, new company, and offices in other markets. And so then what happened, unfortunately, 9/11 hit, and there were no more trade shows. I mean, it was the end of the big era trade shows, and frankly, every trade show, and even conference was canceled for travel restrictions until at least the next summer. I mean, there was fall was dead, spring was dead, everything. So I kept my staff on, trying to keep them there, and lost a ton of money, which is it was the least of the things. But again, you learn how to pivot. So I said at that time, I gave it a shot at my big empire building. I'm going to build my next company more around me. I didn't want to have to deal with a $250,000 a month overhead again, ever.
Right.
Yeah, and all the people and their, whatever they need, et cetera. So I pivoted. I said, let me sell off the things in this company I don't need to do anymore, like the mystery shopping and most of the survey research type stuff, and focusing on the qualitative research, which is what I love to do. So I did that, and sold those companies off and was able to get back to even again, and have been doing qualitative research since. And along the way, I started up trade associations for different areas of marketing research. For mobile researchers, using mobile devices, there's the Mobile Market Research Association, the Mystery Shopping Professionals Association, which is all the companies that hire shoppers, as well as shoppers around the world. And then there's also, I didn't start this one, but I was on the board, and that's a Qualitative Research Consultants Association. So I'm a big believer in associations because I don't feel real competitive. I don't feel like I have trade secrets and things like that. And, it's a matter of relationships. It's a matter of understanding. And I think there's enough work out there for everyone if we just help each other instead of try to, go to war with each other, so to say.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great philosophy. I totally agree with that as well. I think I've always felt like there's plenty of work to go around if you're doing the right thing, and no, that's great to hear. Well, Mark, thanks for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way to keep up with what you're doing and connect with you?
Sure. Well, LinkedIn is always available. It's Mark Michelson, Michelson. And, if you want to connect with me there, that's always a good way. We can chat and things. If anyone's interested in our programs and what we do at CX Talks, then it's just cxtalks.org.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Mark Michelson, CEO of CX Talks, for joining the show. To learn more about both customer and employee experience, I recommend you go to my website at gregkillstrom.com and make sure to check out my latest book, The Center of Experience. More information is available on my website or wherever the book is available, like Amazon. Thanks for listening to The Agile World with Greg Killstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Killstrom. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, from my website at theagile.world or on Amazon or other retailers. Until next week, stay agile.